I think we can pretty well say myth busted on whether or not companies outside of M&M's were willing to work with Kyle Busch. Let's get into it. But first, if you have not already, go down below and subscribe to the channel. It's fast, free, and it lets YouTube know, and it's really the most important way to let YouTube know that you want to see more of my content. And while you're down there, let me know what you have thought of this entire Kyle Busch drama that has literally been taking place over the course of the last 365 days. Because I've been thinking about this a little bit recently because, you know, when M&M's left, yeah, that was a huge deal. But to see how crazy this story has gotten and to see where things are headed in 2023, when we first heard the announcement that M&M's would be leaving Joe Gibbs Racing, I don't think you would have ever bet at that moment that it would end up that Kyle Busch would be racing for Richard Childress, especially after they had their big hubbub and fight over intentional wrecking in the Truck Series, you know, some 10 years ago. It's just hard to believe it's gotten to this point. And because of that, I felt like putting together a bit of a clip show and kind of putting together all of the highlights as it happened on this channel. I think it's a pretty interesting watch, especially now that we have all of the context all together. Major breaking NASCAR news: by 2023, Kyle Busch will be without his traditional primary sponsor. Starting with the 2023 season will not include Mars Incorporated, the maker of Skittles, Twix, Pedigree dog food, yes, Pedigree dog food, and of course, M&M's. Mars has had a major presence in NASCAR since 1997. Remember Derek Cope in the Skittles car? I certainly do, because I'm probably an old fart. And the latest sponsor, major sponsor, they are to depart the NASCAR Cup Series. Now, Adam Stern's report on the Sports Business Journal reports that the estimate of the Mars annual sponsorship to the team is around $20 million per year for a primary sponsorship on 20 to 25 races. Though it's important to note that Stern reports that Mars did inform the team of their departure, their intent to depart in the summer of this year, giving them over a year to search for a new sponsor. Kyle Busch's NASCAR seat at Joe Gibbs Racing is in major jeopardy. He's in big sponsorship trouble. He had a sponsor on the line, but lost it, and now Toyota is talking to the media saying they're in big trouble. We're in a bad place right now. We've got some tremendously heavy lifting in front of us. Kyle Busch is still in big trouble and may well have run out of options to continue racing in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2023. NBC Sports reported that Joe Gibbs Racing almost convinced Red Bull Racing primary sponsor Oracle to step up to sponsor Kyle, but the deal fell through. And now, as the calendar approaches August, most companies capable of paying Kyle Busch $14 million and up have almost all got their 2023 budgets set in stone. That's how the corporate America structure works. A new report suggests that Joe Gibbs Racing has given up on signing Kyle Busch for 2023. Joe Gibbs Racing has essentially stopped talking to Kyle Busch, and that he's talking to a Ford team and a Chevy team.
And the winner
Busch
of the Kyle
is now
Busch sweepstakes
reportedly not coming back to Joe Gibbs Racing in 2023. This is a key development in the Kyle Busch saga, that Kyle Busch will not be at Joe Gibbs Racing in a car next year. Now, obviously, this isn't something that's necessarily unexpected. I think a lot of us thought that Kyle Busch would not return to Joe Gibbs Racing, especially after we saw that video of a very frosty Kyle Busch and Joe Gibbs after the Pocono race. But, you know, it's amazing to see that Kyle Busch will not be at Joe Gibbs Racing. I think a lot of people thought that he would be a lifer there. that they would run him until, the end of time. But when you expect $14 million a year and your $20 million a year sponsor leaves, that makes things untenable. And especially so that you have Ty Gibbs getting a lot of Cup experience, ironically through the injury of Kyle's brother, Kurt. And it would appear that's priming Ty Gibbs for a Cup run in the number 18 car. Now, what was specifically mentioned as the most likely team to win the Kyle Busch sweepstakes? Another obvious answer is Richard Childress Racing, especially if they send Tyler Reddick packing early. And it sounds like, especially based on their recent statement on the matter, that they are none too pleased with Mr. Tyler Reddick, and we've got quite the Alex Palou situation going on there as well. So if Richard Childress Racing cuts Tyler Reddick loose, and perhaps the Kyle Busch theory ultimately pans out to where Reddick gets added to 2311 a year early, would Kyle Busch drive for Richard Childress? Richard Childress Racing! Yes, indeedy do. Cats and dogs are sleeping together for sure. Today, Richard Childress Racing announced that Kyle Busch will be driving the number 8 Chevrolet in 2023. Now you may be saying, wait a second. What about Tyler Reddick? Richard Childress informed Tyler Reddick only an hour before he told the rest of us that he, meaning Tyler Reddick, would no longer be in the 8 car for 2023. But Richard Childress appears committed to Kyle for the future, and that, of course, is the number one thing Kyle, I think, really wanted out of this deal. And Richard Childress went as far as to invoke Dale. And this is what Richard Childress said. When I looked him in the eye, and I had seen that look from Dale Earnhardt Sr.'s eye, he's hungry, and we are going to win. Ty Gibbs. Oh boy, yes, this is a huge story that broke today, and it comes from Joe Gibbs Racing on Twitter. News: Ty Gibbs will compete full-time for Joe Gibbs Racing in the 2023 NASCAR Cup Series behind the wheel of the number 54 Toyota Camry TRD. Gibbs won the 2022 Xfinity Racing title with 7 wins, 23 top 10 finishes, and in just 51 Xfinity Series starts, he's won 11 races, that's 21%, and scored 33 top 10 finishes, that's 64% of his starts, and led over 1,000 laps. He also won the 2021 ARCA Racing Series Championship. Chris Gale, who served as the crew chief during his Xfinity Series Championship season, will move with Gibbs to serve as the crew chief in the Cup Series. JGR intends to utilize the number 18 in the NASCAR Cup Series in future years. Joe Gibbs Racing has really screwed up. Remember when Joe Gibbs Racing said they couldn't keep Kyle Busch because they couldn't find a sponsor for him? Well, not only has a sponsor committed to Kyle Busch on the Richard Childress Racing side, but a major sponsor may be leaving Joe Gibbs Racing next year. We'll talk about that and much more in the world of racing. And now we get to yesterday, when Richard Childress Racing announced that they had almost sold out, or have almost sold out, the entire 8 car for next year, piloted by Kyle Busch. And almost all of their sponsors that were with Tyler Reddick have returned to race with Kyle Busch. That includes Cheddar's Scratch Chicken. I'm leaving that in. Cheddar's Scratch Kitchen, 3 Chi, Lenovo, Alsco Uniforms, and Bet MGM. Cheddar's Scratch Chicken. Can you tell I'm hungry? I don't know. But yesterday, if yesterday was not a spiking the football moment for Kyle Busch over his former employer, Joe Gibbs Racing, I don't know what else to tell you. Because when you look at it and you think about it, Kyle Busch, there was a narrative for so long. I mean, even Kyle Busch, I think, bought into it because you heard him talk about M&Ms and Mars. And granted, we have not seen Kyle Busch in a race situation like he was in with Joe Gibbs Racing, where he could really be himself with Richard Childress yet. Kyle always professed, M&Ms really let me be myself. But it also seemed to be that the implication was that other companies would not allow him to be himself. So I think one of the big narratives going forward with Kyle Busch is how much he does or does not censor himself for these sponsors. But the fact that the sponsors stuck with Richard Childress Racing and stuck with the 8 car means that Kyle Busch's name is not as soiled as a lot of people seem to think it is, particularly those over on the Joe Gibbs Racing side, which, looking in retrospect at that whole retrospective I just put together, it's amazing to see that situation fall apart in the way that it did. I guess it makes sense when you have a $20 million sponsor leave, but just the fact that they couldn't get the Kyle Busch deal across the finish line and let him go to another team is simply baffling to me. But at least at this point, this video is a bit of a bow tied around the Kyle Busch situation, at least until probably February, unless something else crazy happens. It's been fun to follow, and I can't wait to follow the next crazy happening in the world of racing. And if you didn't already know, this is the place to be. Subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.